It's time for the Treasure Hunter ranking, where I rank 17 adventure films from worst to best. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Hope you're having a good one today. I'm the movie ranker, and today is the day for the Treasure Hunter ranking, hosted by SPC Unleashed. We collaborated in the past. I was a guest on another one of his rankings, the sci-fi action ranking we did last year with 30 some films. This year it's 17 movies. They all have to do with treasure hunting. We got the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, Uncharted, National Treasure, Indiana Jones, the Mummy movies. This is going to be a whole lot of fun, guys. Of course, this is just my ranking, so don't look at me crazy once you start seeing my placements. It's just my opinion, but I love to hear how you rank these films down in the comment section. And of course, this is hosted by SPC Unleashed, so he's going to be putting out his own ranking as well. A link to his channel and video will be down in the description of this video. BACKTRACK Cinema, Jason, was supposed to also collaborate with us, but he got a touch of pneumonia and a lung infection and all that, so he's not going to be able to do it. But anybody else who happens to join in last minute, I will make sure to put their channel links in the description of this video. And without wasting any more time, let's dive in. So for me, easily coming into last place, I have to give it to The Mummy from 2017. The one starring Tom Cruise. This was a first time watch for me. I've heard nothing but bad things since its release, so I never checked it out. Of course, I had to for this ranking, and I can confirm it's a terrible flick. To be honest, the first 40 minutes or so, I was like, this isn't so bad. It's very generic, but once the movie kept going, it just kept getting worse and worse, especially by the whole final act. Tom Cruise is completely wasted in here. We got scenes with him running through a town, which is great, like Mission Impossible movies and that, because it's all practical and you got these great stunts. But in here, it seems so fake. He's just in front of a green screen. You can totally tell the CGI is not that great, and it really takes you out of the film and all the action sequences. And as for the story itself, I saw it was very weak. Halfway through the story, or in the last end of it, Tom Cruise's character Nick ends up becoming the mummy himself. He ends up getting this curse, and he just so happens to be able to fight it off, you know. There's more good in him than evil. I'm like, that's bullshit. This guy was stealing artifacts and that and selling it to the black market, but you're going to tell me he's a good guy. Yeah, and it just felt like they were trying to build this universal monster world. They were focusing more on that than focusing on the single movie itself. They were trying to set up for something bigger, and it totally backfired on them. You got Russell Crowe as Jekyll and Hyde, but you'd get nothing fun or exciting out of that character either. It's just a terrible movie. The Mummy is forgettable, the girl herself, and this whole movie is kind of forgettable with a bunch of added in humor that never works for me. So this one easily came into last place. Up next at number 16, I'm going with Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. I know this movie has its fans, but I'm definitely not one of them. I hate this film. I had a hard time to rewatch it for this ranking. It just bores the hell out of me. It annoys me. You got this one character, Helena, who is one of our main characters with Indy, and I just can't stand her. She's so obnoxious. She's annoying. She's self-entitled. I just can't stand her. She's always putting down Indy and stuff like that, and I just hate to see it. And Indiana Jones himself, Harrison Ford, is way too old for the role at this point, I feel. And I just don't like where this character is headed in this film. He's in a very dark, kind of depressing place, and I just don't like watching it. I will admit that the first sequence where they de-age him, that sequence is done pretty well. But everything else about this film is pretty much a failure to me. Yeah, I don't like Mads Mikkelsen's villain either. He's a great actor, but he's really giving nothing in here. He's so generic. So yeah, another shitty-ass Indiana Jones film. Up next at number 15, I'm going with The Mummy, The Tomb of the Dragon Emperor. Yeah, I think that's the name of this. It's a dumb name. But yeah, I hate this Mummy movie as well. The only saving grace is Brendan Fraser, and even him, he's just not quite as good as before. We get Jet Li, another great actor. They give him a villain role, and it's completely wasted again. For most of the movie, he's this really bad CGI graphics of this like statue coming after them, the stone statue or whatever, because he's cursed. It's just terrible. There's no real mummies in this film either, so it doesn't even make sense in the franchise. The tone is way off. The jokes never land. It's not funny whatsoever. They keep trying to make Jonathan a funny character, which worked in the past, but it did not work in this film. And once the Yetis show up to rescue them at one point, I completely check out. This movie is just dumb, forgettable, and hopefully I'll never have to watch it again. Up next at number 14, I got Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides. Easily the worst Pirates movie for me. It's, again, forgettable. Just all the magic seems to be gone by this point. Jack Sparrow is like the only interesting character in here, and we kind of get too much of him, where he was better in small doses spread out throughout the film, but when he becomes like the main character, it just doesn't quite work as well. No Keira Knightley, no Orlando Bloom. That's a big no-no. Both of them are not in this movie at all, Will or Elizabeth, which is terrible. I loved those characters before. And I hate what they did with Barbossa. It's just a pretty bad movie. Penelope Cruz and Ian McShane are usually great actors as well, but again, terribly written characters. Blackbeard is written up to be... He's so hyped up to be this crazy villain, but I feel like he's so overhyped that once we actually get him, it's kind of a bit lackluster in my opinion. The only really cool part about this film is the mermaid scene. Now that scene is badass, where they come up, try to convince these guys that they're just harmless mermaids, and then they attack. That is badass, but everything else in this movie kind of sucks. Coming up next at number 13, I'm going with Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. This one gets a lot of hate. It's not a good movie, but I don't think it's a dumpster fire either. It's somewhere in the middle for me. I'm very mixed on it, but it's still entertaining enough to watch. I just feel like it does have flaws. Like, one flaw is the movie doesn't really know what direction it wants to go in and with its tone and its vibes. It tries to be this more sci-fi eccentric film, but at the same time it wants to stick to the old serial adventure type flicks. That's George Lucas and Spielberg's ideas kind of clashing, and you really feel it here as well. Like I said, the tone, it's a little silly at times, like when Mutt's swinging on the vines with the monkeys or the giant ants. But I think the movie is still entertaining. I think Harrison Ford is still great in the role. He's like a seasoned, at a perfect age here. He's not too old, but he's like just enough. Another ridiculous scene is when he gets in the fridge in the whole Nuketown scenario. That's a silly again. Like I said, the tone seems like it's a little bit off. And the way it wraps up with the aliens, the extraterrestrial beings, is a bit underwhelming for me. I would have liked to see more of that scenario at the end. But overall, I think it's still a decent movie. I like the Mutt character. A lot of people hate Shia LaBeouf's character in here, but I don't seem to mind him at all. So, yeah, a decent film that has a lot of flaws, I feel, but it's not necessarily terrible or good. It's somewhere in between for me. Up next at number 12, I'm going with Uncharted. Now, I don't know if this is a hot take or not, having this low in the ranking, but I'm not the biggest fan of this one either. It's a mixed bag as well. Quick disclaimer, I've never played the video games, so I have no connection with that. That being said, I still feel like, what's his name, is so miscasted, Tom Holland, as the main lead here, Nathan Drake. Even though I don't know what the character's supposed to be like, he just doesn't feel like this action adventure star like Harrison Ford and some of these other great actors. He just doesn't have it for me. He's missing it. He's okay for the puzzles and stuff, but when it comes to the hand-to-hand combat and the running and everything, it just doesn't seem to work. And for some reason, it's hard to imagine him as someone who's not Spider-Man. He's kind of locked into that role at this point. So yeah, I feel like he was kind of miscasted. Mark Wahlberg's okay as Sully, but he just feels like he's playing Mark Wahlberg like he does in a lot of his films. I really like the Chloe character. I'm not sure on what the actress's name was. She's not as famous. But yeah, she was great. I just don't like how her character doesn't have quite an arc or anything. She doesn't really learn anything throughout the film. She's still always backstabbing and whatnot. Where Sully kind of does that, but I feel like he became a better person by the end of this flick. But yeah, it's pretty generic. A lot of people said it feels like it's written by AI, and I agree with that. If you've seen an adventure movie before, this movie's not going to have anything new in it or anything that will blow you away. It's satisfying enough, but it does feel very generic. And there's certain scenes like the whole intro, which is really the middle of the movie, which they come back to, with all the crates hanging off the back of the airplane in the sky, and Nathan's like climbing them and stuff. That looks so fake to me. It just takes me right out. You gotta go more practical with these adventure movies, because to me that's just a big green screen, and this is just like the MCU all over again. So things like that are eyesores for me. Up next at number 11, I'm going with Pirates of the Caribbean: Dead Men Tell No Tales. This one has a couple titles. This may be controversial having this high up in my ranking, even though it's not great. I give it like 3 stars. It just gets the passing mark for me, but I found this was way better than On Stranger Tides. I much preferred the tone and the story to this one. I think the Spaniards make for badass villains. They're ruthless, killing all these pirates. And I love the whole curse that they have and how they're out to get Jack Sparrow for putting this curse on them. The whole backstory to Jack, showing him as a younger version of him doing that, was really cool too. We never really got to see Jack's past before, so I like that. Some of the new characters are nice. I like Karina, who we learned to find out at the end that she's Barbossa's daughter. But yeah, I just love her. Has a lot of charisma. She's an astronomer. She brings interesting things to the table about stars and whatnot. On the other hand, we got Henry, Will's son. Not a fan of him at all. I felt like he was poorly written, but I really like the Karina character. And yeah, this movie might have a bit too much over the top, silly action. I can agree with that. And Johnny Depp is giving a little bit more than usual with his performance wise, a little bit more over the top. He's always over the top, but this one I feel like he went a little too far. But aside from that, a decent entry in the Pirates franchise. Reaching my top 10, at number 10, I'm going with Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End. Now, for this movie being a longer one, I feel like it does a good job at keeping you entertained. It has pretty good pacing. Most of my problems with this movie are all at the back end, at the very end. But I do like the whole arc and storyline of Elizabeth and how she's kind of diving deeper and deeper into the pirate life and everything surrounded that. That's great. Will, I really like his ending too. It's kind of sad, kind of bittersweet, but him becoming the new captain of the Flying Dutchman and, living out his days there. There's something nice about that, even though, like I said, it's kind of bittersweet, but it's satisfying in a way. And yeah, all these characters and that and all their interactions are just so fun throughout this film. I just feel like at the very end, the final act, they kind of rush things and they do things that I wasn't the biggest fan of, like the way Beckett goes out. It's kind of lame. Calypso, the big reveal of Calypso being the woman from the swamp. I thought that was kind of out of nowhere and there was no build up to that. And I figured she's going to have this big epic battle or something, but she doesn't do much besides like a whirlpool and kind of disappears and never to be seen again after that, which is unfortunate. Yeah, just it wraps up the trilogy nicely. I just don't like how they do a lot of the things in the final act. For instance, the marriage between Will and Elizabeth on the ship. This seems so goofy. Again, the tone is kind of off. Only half the jokes land, but still a decent way to wrap up the original trilogy. Coming up next at number 9, I'm going with The Mummy Returns. Now, this is a movie that could have been an epic failure, but I feel like the glue that holds it together is the returning cast members and the characters themselves. Characters are all still great. They're still fun. They're just as great as they were in the original film. I actually like Rick and Evelyn's relationship, maybe even more in this one because they're actually together and you really see that love and just the progress they made since the first film. It's all there. You got their son in this one as well, which is a cute little kid who's fun to watch, and he's a lot like his father Rick. He's kind of the best of both worlds of his mom and his dad. Emotep's back. We got all of them back, all the actors too. Like I said, Brendan Fraser, Rachel Weisz, they're all here, and that's really the great part because everything else is not as great as the first. Even though we get Emotep back, he's just not as threatening as the first movie. His presence isn't as scary in here, and it's more in a race to get an item before he gets it, right, to resurrect Scorpion King or Anubis's army, right? They're in a race against time there, but you never really feel the pressure of the time. And he even kidnaps Rick's kid, Emotep, and he does never really feels like he's in real danger. He's going to survive. So it plays it a bit on the safe side, I feel, and it does get a little bit silly. Like, instead of using a plane, in this one they use like a hot air ship, like boat. It's just like, what? That's a little too childish for me. Aside from the childish tone in here and less of a threat, I feel the rest of the movie is fairly solid. Definitely with the characters, and the story is okay. The special effects is definitely terrible, especially with the Scorpion King at the very end. It looks like something straight out of a PS1 video game. And I would have liked to seen a little bit more of the Scorpion King and his story in here, but still a decent follow-up to the original. Of course, all held together by its returning cast. Coming in at number 8, I got Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest. A pretty decent follow-up to the original. We get Davy Jones in here as a villain, and I think he's great. Whether we're talking about the effects on him or the character himself, played by Bill Nye, and he's a seasoned, friggin' excellent actor, and he delivers on this role. Even though he's all covered up in effects, you can still see those facial expressions in that in the character, which is great. And Jack Sparrow has an interesting storyline in here, having to pay back a blood debt he made in the past, and he may suffer eternal damnation if things don't get fixed. So he's trying to fix that. We get Bootstrap Bill in here. We hear him so much in the original, hear about him. So it's really cool to actually put a face to the name in this one. Finding out he's Will's father, and Will ends up on the ship with him and everything, and it makes for some tense scenes, especially in that card game they play. I don't understand the card game, but it's still super interesting watching it, and it's very tense, almost like Casino Royale or something, like they're playing a poker game. I feel like it's a solid story, great characters, a lot of the cast returns. I just feel that it doesn't work necessarily as good as a standalone, like the original film, of course, because the original film wasn't set up as a trilogy. This is definitely the middle piece of a trilogy, and you really feel that on the way it ends on this big cliffhanger, which isn't really satisfying if you're watching this on its own. But if you're going through the original trilogy, this is definitely a great chapter and one to look out for. Up next at number 7, I got National Treasure and the Book of Secrets. This was a first time watch for me. I've known about this and the first film since their release, but I just never checked them out. And they were both first time watches, and they're both fairly solid. You'll see the first one's not far from part 2 here on my list. This one, I love the story in this one of how Nicolas Cage's character, Mr. Gates, Ben Gates, is trying to clear his family name in the assassination, involved in the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. That's super interesting. I love the whole section where they have to kidnap the presidents. That's really thrilling and just interesting to see how things are going to play out. And the book itself, how the president has this book with all the secrets of the land in there, from Area 51 to everything, all the assassination attempts and stuff. And it makes you think like, wow, I wonder if this book actually exists. A little dumb to have the book hiding out in the Library of Congress, though. You think you would have that shit hidden better than that, but I think that's super interesting. Story's not written as tight or as focused as the original. That's why I think I put it down a little lower. And I do like the whole relationship moments, especially with the parents, with Ben's mom and dad, how they were broken up and they're slowly coming back together throughout this film. But you do see their differences and why they weren't together. Um, but I don't like Ben and his relationship status with his woman. I can't remember her name, the blonde one. Uh, they're not together at the start of this. They're kind of divorced or separated or whatever. And they quickly come back together. And for the rest of the movie, you don't really feel any tension or nothing between them. It feels like they've always been together. They never split up. I think that could have been written a bit better, in my opinion. But I do like the parents' relationship. I think they dealt with that great. But yeah, a pretty solid adventure flick, you know. They go places, they get clues. You know how these movies work, and this one's kind of no different. The puzzles are fun, the adventure side of things, and the whole running around the world to figure out stuff is fun. So a pretty solid adventure flick. Oh, and I just want to add, I love the scene where Nick Cage goes full on Nick Cage, and you know what I mean, with his outbursts and his over the top acting. We get a little bit of that in this one here, so that was a lot of joy to watch. At number 6, I got Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Now, this is a fan favorite in the franchise, my third favorite Indiana Jones film, and yeah, it's pretty damn good. We got Harrison Ford teamed up with his father in here, Indy's father, who is actually played by Sean Connery, the great Sean Connery. And it's funny because he's more of an academic in this one. He's not like this badass fighter or nothing, which is funny because he, you know, was the original James Bond. So it's just really cool to see him in a different role like this. And just their chemistry is great. They're great when they're both on screen together. And just, you know, he wasn't the best father to Indy, but, you know, they're both great at historical items and stuff. Of course, this film kind of feels like it's copying a bit off the original. You know, we got Nazis back again. They're after a religious artifact again. Repeats a couple of the same beats, and it never quite hits the marks of the original when it comes to the action or the adventure side of things. But this is more than just your generic adventure film. I think it stands above that. We get a lot of fun sequences, some funny stuff in here. A few things that are a bit too silly again for me. One instance is the whole intro where it shows Indy as a kid, I think played by River Phoenix, and he's going on the train, and that seems kind of goofy to me. And you got like animals busting through the tops of the train and that. Um, Another scene is where Indy and his father are tied up and they're going on each side of the wall and there's a fire on one side, or them figuring out that they both slept with the same girl. There's some little weird things in here, but overall it's still a fun thrill ride from start to finish. Coming up next at number 5, I got National Treasure, the first one. Like it just a bit more than part 2, but they're both fairly close to each other in ratings. Again, a very solid adventure type flick. I like how there's a lot of historical stuff added in here, some real, some not, and it kind of makes for a fun watch because after you watch it, you can kind of research and try to figure out what was real and what was not in here. They're trying to steal the Declaration of Independence, which is really exciting. He's trying to get there before the villain, who's played by Sean Bean. And interesting enough, this is one of the only movies Sean Bean doesn't die, which I was waiting for him to die the whole movie. And by the end, I'm like, wow, he just ended up going to prison. He'll probably die in prison. But yeah, very solid flick. A little bit more focused and tight than part 2, I think, story-wise. Both these movies are a little too long, I feel like, for their source material, though. For their screenplay. Could have been knocked off at least like 15 minutes out of here. But it is pretty damn fun. All the puzzles and everything to get themselves into, and how Ben Gates always seems to be like a step ahead, even though he doesn't let on that he's ahead half the time. He's always thinking one step ahead in his mind. And yeah, a very solid flick. It can get a little bit too rinse and repeat sometimes. Like, we'll go to this location, we find the clue, which tells us to go to this location. We find the clue, which tells us to go to this location. And both these films kind of suffer from that. After a while, it just starts to get more of the same. But other than that, a very solid Disney flick. Reaching my top 4, now we're in the heavy hitters. At number 4, Raiders of the Lost Ark, known as one of the best adventure movies of all time, and I can agree with that. I can see how this influenced every single action adventure movie that came out after it. Even though it took influences from films of the past, it kind of modernized them and made them into cinema that we know today. I mean, that whole intro scene where Indy's going in to get that artifact and he has a boulder rolling after him and all the traps. It's just so fun, so iconic to watch, you know? And there's multiple scenes like that throughout this entire film. It just runs at a great pace. It's always thrilling, exciting. You want to see him outsmart these Nazis. But Indy always ends up in these situations where he's trapped or, you know, he gets put in a hole or whatnot, surrounded by snakes, and he always has to try to find a way out of there by using his smarts and his wits and whatnot. And yeah, Harrison Ford just, you know, sold the role here. I can't see anybody else playing Indiana Jones. He's just so good in there. He's maybe even better as Indiana Jones and at what he is in Star Wars. I mean, he's that good in here. And yeah, it's just a really fun, thrilling adventure. It has the right amount of humor in there. Of course, the iconic scene where he hauls out the gun in the marketplace and shoots the guy because he was just fed up at that point. And the whole ending is just so epic, and it's one of the best moments in cinema where the Nazis get their faces melted off. Some people say the effects aren't great, but I think they look amazing. I love the look of the effects when their faces are melting off. And it definitely, you know, pushes the boundaries for PG movies because PG-13 didn't exist back then. So yeah, I understand why this movie is seen as one of the best adventure flicks of all time. I do rate it highly. It's just there's a couple I prefer over them, that's all, but it's definitely iconic and influential. And I can't mention this movie without talking about Marion. She is one of my favorite characters in here. She's not as good when she returns in Crystal Skull, but in this original film, she is so damn good. Played by, what's her name? Karen Allen. Her and Rachel Weisz in The Mummy are both up there in like my favorite females ever in adventure flicks. They're so damn good. I just wanted to mention that. Reaching my top 3, at number 3, I got Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Yes, this is my favorite indie movie. I love the original, but this one just suits my taste just a bit more, my personal taste. It's got a darker tone. There's more horror elements in here. Me being a big horror fan, it's right up my alley. Short Round is one of the best side characters in the franchise. I wish we would have got more of him. I love Dr. Jones. I just freaking love him. And they both help each other out, you know. He helps Indy out just as much as Indy helps him out. So they're great. Willie gets a bad rap. I know she can be a bit of a damsel and be complaining a lot, but you see the scenario she gets herself into? No wonder. But I just never had a problem with the Willie character like a lot of other people did. She may not be the best female character in here, but I don't have any problems with her. And yeah, this movie just moves at an incredible pace. There's action set pieces after action set pieces. It just never stops. The story never takes a rest. It's never a dull moment. Whether we're talking about the whole intro, and then they're in the getaway, and then they're in a plane, and then they're falling out of the plane, you know, it just keeps going and going. Then they end up in the temple, and there's sacrifices going on, and blood and lava, and it's just so intense, so fun, and it moves, like I said, at an incredible pace all the way to the cart scenes. It reminds me of a Donkey Kong Country or something. We're in those mine carts. Such an incredible scene that was supposed to actually be in the original movie, but was cut due to budget. I'm glad they got to do it here. And then it ends on this really thrilling final act on the rope bridge. It's just so damn good. And this one's actually a prequel, which a lot of people don't seem to realize. It actually takes place a year or two before the original, I believe. So the only negative I have about this flick is the one scene where they come out of the plane on the raft, the water raft. That is kind of too silly and dumb for me. That's only one little part of this film. Everything else is freaking masterful. It gets dark. I mean, when Indy gets possessed or whatever in the temple, you're like, wow, he's become evil. He's like under the spell there. it goes dark places, but I think that's why I like it. And there's even a jump scare in here. A guy pops up behind a rock. It got me the first time I watched it, but yeah, just a damn good flick. Coming up next at number 2, it's tough to pick my top 2, but at number 2 I went with The Mummy from 1999. Now, I didn't necessarily grow up with Indiana Jones. I've only always known it existed, but I just wasn't really into adventure flicks as much as a kid. But one adventure flick I was into was this one, The Mummy. It Ever since it came out, I remember renting it and falling in love with it and watching it a million times on cable. It again has enough horror elements in there to keep my attention even as a child. Emotep is just such a badass villain. He's very threatening. Every time he's in a room with someone, you fear for their life. And I feel like they kind of lose that in the Mummy sequels. So this one had the perfect blend of like the old Universal monsters horror, mixing it with like an Indiana Jones type formula, and it just really works. Yeah, and like I said, Emotep's so badass, especially that scene where he becomes like the sandstorm and you see his face. That's so iconic, and it actually looks great for 1999. Like we had a lot worse CGI just in the past 5 years compared to this film. Stat cast, like I said before, Brendan Fraser, Rachel Weisz, all of them deliver great performances, like top notch. The action's thrilling, it's always moving. Again, great pacing, really immersive world and great mythology with the, Egypt and mummies themselves, and Emotep's whole backstory on how he slept with the pharaoh's woman and all this. That is all so interesting and great. What else can I say about this film? It is just masterful. One thing that always got under my skin as a kid was the bugs, the scarabs who get under the skin of people in the movies. I mean, that is just so freaky, and it's little things like that that make this movie great. And what's that one side character's name? Benny, who kind of keeps working with the bad guy Emotep, but he gets screwed over in the very end. I think he is hilarious and such a fun little side henchman. Yeah, this movie is a blast from start to finish. It was tough not putting this in first place, but at second place, it is still a friggin' blast. But for me, coming in the first place in this treasure hunter ranking is Pirates of the Caribbean: The Curse of the Black Pearl. Possibly Disney's best live action movie ever made. It is just so original. We don't get a whole lot of movies about pirates, so right there it's kind of unique. And what they do with the material is just so clever. It's a longer movie, but it's deliberately paced. It's just brilliant. Jack Sparrow was born in this film. Johnny Depp was already a star. He was in so many movies, from Edward Scissorhands to even the original Nightmare on Elm Street. But this is the movie that topped his career, I feel, with the performance of Jack Sparrow. That is what he's known for now, and no one could ever replace him. And from the first time you see him in this film, he's just so funny, so cool and interesting, and just the way he moves and his actions, he completely made this role his own, and no one will ever be able to take that away from him. And yeah, I just love all the characters in here, from Elizabeth to Will. These are the best versions of those characters as well, and I love their little love relationship. We've seen it before. It's familiar, where someone from a higher class and a lower class like each other, but they shouldn't. But it's done really well here. The villains are so damn good. Barbossa's at his best, and his whole crew. Love how when they're going to the moonlight, you see the skeleton versions of them. Again, the CGI, this is 2003, and it's the best in the series for me. So damn good. The whole curse itself is interesting. What else is there to say about these top tier films? I mean, they're just perfect. I can't find a single flaw in this flick. It's that good, and none of the sequels in this franchise can even come close to the quality of the first film. So I don't have much else to say. It's just that damn good. So it comes in the first place in the Treasure Hunter ranking. So there you have it, guys. There's my ranking of all 17 Treasure Hunter movies, ranked from worst to best. Just my opinion, guys, but I love to hear yours down in the comment section. I'm sure we'll be widely different, especially with this many films. Like I said, this is hosted by SPC Unleashed, so make sure you go sub to his channel and check out his ranking as well. Link will be in the description of this video, along with my Instagram, my letterbox. Subscribe to my channel as well if you like rankings like this. I try to put out one at least a week. Summer's here, so you know I'm going to be putting out some shark movie rankings and stuff like that if you're interested. And yeah, that's pretty much all I got for you guys today. This was fun, and I can't wait till next time. I think we're going to have another big ranking like this in August, so stay tuned for that. That's all I have for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed it, and until next time, thanks for watching.